the Shadow Stalker. In the quiet town of Greenwood, a shadow lurked in the darkness, stalking its prey with ruthless precision. The residents whispered of the Shadow Stalker, a serial killer who had haunted their streets for years, leaving a trail of death and fear in their wake. Detective Sarah Evans had been hunting the Shadow Stalker for as long as she could remember. The case consumed her, driving her to the brink of obsession. She had studied every detail, every clue, determined to catch the elusive killer before they struck again. But the Shadow Stalker was cunning, always one step ahead of the law. Their victims were chosen at random, their deaths brutal and senseless. Each crime scene was a twisted tableau of terror, a grim reminder of the killer's depravity. Sarah pored over the evidence, searching for any clue that might lead her to the killer's identity. But the more she investigated, the more elusive they seemed. It was as if the Shadow Stalker was always watching, taunting her with their presence. As the body count rose, the town descended into panic. People locked their doors at night, afraid to venture out after dark. Sarah knew she had to stop the killer before they struck again, but time was running out. One night, as Sarah patrolled the streets alone, she spotted a figure lurking in the shadows. Heart pounding, she drew her gun and approached cautiously. The figure turned, revealing a face twisted with madness, a face she recognized all too well. It was her own reflection staring back at her from a darkened storefront window. Sarah stumbled back, her mind reeling. How could this be possible? Was she losing her grip on reality? But before she could make sense of it, a voice whispered in her ear, a voice she knew all too well. "Hello, Detective Evans," it said, the words dripping with malice. "It's been a long time." Sarah spun around, her gun trained on the figure standing before her. It was a man she had arrested years ago for a string of brutal murders, a man who had been executed for his crimes. "You're dead," she whispered, her voice barely a breath. The man smiled a cold, cruel grin. "Am I? Or is it you who's lost touch with reality?" With a sudden surge of terror, Sarah realized the truth. The Shadow Stalker wasn't just a killer, it was something far more sinister. It was a force of darkness, a manifestation of all the evil in the world. And now, it set its sights on her. Sarah ran, her footsteps echoing in the empty streets. But no matter how fast she ran, the shadow was always there, lurking just out of sight. It whispered in her ear, taunting her with its presence. She knew she couldn't outrun it. She was trapped in a nightmare of her own making, a nightmare that would consume her whole. As dawn broke over the horizon, Sarah Evans disappeared into the shadows, another victim claimed by the darkness. And the town of Greenwood was left to wonder who would be next. Days turned into weeks, and the people of Greenwood lived in fear of the Shadow Stalker's return. Sarah's disappearance weighed heavily on them, a constant reminder of the danger that lurked in the darkness. But life went on, as it always does. The town tried to move past the tragedy, but the memory of Sarah Evans lingered like a spectre, haunting their every waking moment. Then, one night, a young couple was walking home from a late-night movie when they spotted something in the alley, a shadowy figure lurking in the darkness. They froze, their hearts pounding in their chests. The figure stepped forward, revealing a face twisted with madness, a face they recognized all too well. It was Sarah Evans, or what was left of her. Her eyes glowed with an otherworldly light, and her voice echoed in their minds. "Run," she whispered, her voice a chilling whisper. "Run, before it's too late." The couple turned and fled, their footsteps echoing in the empty streets. But no matter how fast they ran, the shadow was always there, lurking just out of sight. And as they disappeared into the darkness, the town of Greenwood knew that the nightmare was far from over. For the Shadow Stalker had returned, and it hungered for blood. The Whispering Hollow. In the heart of the Appalachian Mountains lies a small forgotten town named Whispering Hollow. A veil of mist clings to the trees, and the moonlight casts long, eerie shadows that seem to move on their own. For over 20 years, Whispering Hollow has been shrouded in fear. its residents haunted by a presence that stalks the night, a serial killer known only as the Whisperer. It began in the late summer of 2003, when the town was still vibrant and full of life. The first victim was found near the edge of the forest, her body mutilated and arranged in a grotesque display. Her name was Emily Carter, a local schoolteacher beloved by all. The police had no leads, no suspects, only the haunting sight of Emily's lifeless eyes staring into the darkened canopy above. Weeks turned into months, and then another body was discovered. This time it was Mark Reynolds, a young mechanic with dreams of leaving the Hollow for a brighter future. His body was found in a similar state, and the fear that had been simmering in the town now boiled over into outright panic. The Whisperer had struck again, and the sense of dread grew with each passing day. As the years passed, the killings continued, each more brutal and horrifying than the last. The Whisperer was methodical, leaving no trace of their presence except the broken bodies of their victims. The townspeople became prisoners of their own fear, locking their doors and windows at night, whispering prayers to keep the darkness at bay. Yet, despite their efforts, the body count continued to rise. Detective Deborah Miller was assigned to the case in 2010, a seasoned investigator with a reputation for solving the unsolvable. She was determined to bring the Whisperer to justice, but the deeper she delved into the case, the more elusive the killer became. Every clue led to a dead end, every lead evaporated like mist in the morning sun. It was as if the Whisperer was a ghost, an unseen force that could not be caught. Deborah spent countless nights poring over crime scene photos and autopsy reports, trying to find a pattern, a clue that would break the case wide open. She became obsessed, her every waking moment consumed by the hunt for the killer. Her colleagues watched with concern as she slowly unraveled, her once sharp mind clouded by fatigue and frustration. In the summer of 2013, the Whisperer claimed their most high-profile victim yet, Mayor Jonathan Harris. His body was found hanging from a tree in the centre of town, a gruesome symbol of the killer's power and control. The town was in an uproar, and the pressure on Deborah to solve the case intensified. But despite her best efforts, the Whisperer remained a step ahead, always just out of reach. Years turned into decades, and the body count grew. The Whisperer became a legend, a ghost story whispered around campfires and told to scare misbehaving children. But for those who had lost loved ones, the fear was all too real. Deborah Miller retired in 2023, a broken woman haunted by her failure to catch the killer. She left Whispering Hollow, hoping to find some semblance of peace, but the memories followed her wherever she went. In the autumn of 2024, a new detective arrived in Whispering Hollow. Detective Sarah Thompson was young, ambitious, and determined to succeed where her predecessor had failed. She spent weeks immersing herself in the case, reading every file, every report, and interviewing anyone who had lived through the terror of the past 2 decades. One cold November night, Sarah received an anonymous tip, a cryptic message scrawled on a piece of old parchment and left on her doorstep. It read, "The Whisperer walks among you. Look to the past for answers." She stared at the note, her mind racing. Who had left it? And what did it mean? Determined to follow the lead, Sarah began to dig into the town's history, searching for connections that had been overlooked. She discovered that the killings had begun shortly after a fire had destroyed the old Carter mansion, a grand estate that had once stood on the outskirts of town. The fire had claimed the lives of the entire Carter family, save for one, a young boy named Jacob. Jacob Carter had vanished after the fire, presumed dead. But Sarah found no record of his body ever being recovered. Intrigued, she delved deeper into Jacob's past, uncovering a troubled history of abuse and neglect. The more she learned, the more she began to suspect that Jacob had survived the fire and returned to exact his revenge on the town that had turned a blind eye to his suffering. One moonless night, Sarah ventured into the ruins of the Carter mansion, hoping to find some clue that would confirm her suspicions. The air was thick with the smell of damp earth and decay, and the silence was oppressive. As she picked her way through the rubble, she felt a presence, a cold, malevolent force watching her from the shadows. Her flashlight beam caught a glint of metal, and she crouched down to investigate. Buried beneath a pile of charred wood and debris was a small tin box. She pried it open with trembling hands, revealing a collection of old photographs, letters, and a diary. The diary belonged to Jacob Carter, and its pages were filled with the tormented thoughts of a young boy driven to the brink of madness by years of abuse. As Sarah read, a chilling realization dawned on her. Jacob had survived the fire, and he had been living in the shadows, watching and waiting. The Whisperer was not a ghost, but a man driven by a desire for vengeance, a man who had learned to move silently through the night, striking terror into the hearts of those who had wronged him. The final entry in the diary sent a shiver down Sarah's spine. It read, "They will never forget me. I will make them remember." She knew then that she was closer than ever to catching the Whisperer, but the danger was greater than she had ever imagined. As she left the ruins, she felt a cold hand on her shoulder and spun around, her flashlight illuminating a gaunt, hollow-eyed figure. Jacob Carter stood before her, his face twisted into a mask of rage and sorrow. "You should have stayed away," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the sound of her racing heart. In a blur of motion, Jacob lunged at her, and Sarah fought back with all her strength. The struggle was fierce, and she could feel her energy waning. She grabbed the gun holstered at her side. She drew it and fired, the sound echoing through the night. Jacob fell to the ground, a look of surprise and pain etched on his face. Sarah stood over his lifeless body, a mixture of relief and sorrow washing over her. The Whisperer was dead, but the scars he had left on Whispering Hollow would never fully heal.